Hello, everybody. Welcome to a midday Narrative Live special report. It's good to be with you. I'm looking down quickly and just making sure that we have a live feed going on. But let me also introduce to you again our new friend, Ann P. Mitchell, who is joining us from parts unknown, but he's here to talk to us about all things Epstein and all things related to the shooting on Saturday night, or the shooting attempt on Saturday night. We will show you exactly what is in the affidavit of Cole Thomas Allen and go through it in detail. But because we've had some issues before, I just want to make sure that we're completely actually streaming. So I'm going to do a double check here. It looks like we're live on my site. Are we live on yours?
Oh, hey, guess what? It just started on mine.
Ah, perfect. Miracles do happen sometime on Substack. Anne, how are you today?
I am really, really well. How are you?
I'm good. I've been confounded by the events on Saturday night, and it's just one of these problems that keeps nagging me because I don't understand how you can have all this political opportunity and opportunism by the president. He's out there, being labeled a pedophile and then saying he's not a pedophile, but then deflecting to the Democrats as the reason the shooter was committing this alleged assassination attempt. And that to me is just seems too perfect, in its construction as a political opportunity for the president for it not to be sort of coordinated by his side. On the other hand, there's the incredible evidence of the shooter's affidavit and his history, which seemed to indicate perhaps a person who became radicalized and was there to actually execute an assassination attempt, even though he doesn't seem to have the money and the resources to fund this thing. But let's say he got that from somewhere. The question then emerges from this affidavit is, why did he undertake this thing if he knew it wasn't really going to be possible for him to succeed? Charging the magnetometers was not going to be successful ever as a way to get to the president, who was on a different floor, many feet away through a very crowded environment. Just doesn't make sense to me that he was actually trying to do an assassination attempt. What he was trying to do was storm the magnetometers. For what reason? We don't know. Maybe a suicide attempt, maybe it was something else. And so I'm so excited that you're here because you're a lawyer. You understand these things from a different perspective. You have a keen legal sense. You write the incredible Substack notes from the front that everyone should subscribe to. And you've been a passionate advocate for Epstein survivors, so you know the field. And so I'm really interested to get your take on all of this, and we'll go through this piece by piece by piece and outline exactly what's in this affidavit. So what's your general take, without giving away your big theory yet? What's your general take?
Well, I agree with everything you've just said. And it is very hard in either direction, whether this was an actual non-staged event or it was a staged or a false flag event. None of the pieces line up cleanly in either direction. And I actually believe that Cole Allen was trying to make a statement without actually killing anybody. That is what I believe. And I think that his email, and please people, stop buying into calling it a manifesto. This is a term of art that the media and the White House are using to demonize Cole Allen and not let him be a sympathetic figure.
Such a good point. Such a good point. Thank you for saying that, because every time I hit that word when I'm writing it, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So I appreciate your note there, and I think the media needs to be very careful of using this word manifesto, which implies assassin.
It implies really a lot of contemplation and evil intent and all that sort of thing. But also, for people who don't know, this was an email that was sent to a few of his family members and one person that he used to work with, I believe. And it was a private email, and the email itself was very short. The so-called manifesto was actually an attachment. It was a text file that was attached to that email. So this was not something that he was producing publicly as a political statement, which is what a manifesto is. This was him saying to his parents, hey, this is why I'm doing this, and you need to know this in case I don't survive.
Right, right. This is a very personal email to a few people that he had had connections with. Interestingly enough, some people that he had romantic or other interactions with online that he doesn't name, and doesn't name the gender either, which I thought was interesting. But he also talks about friends and churchgoers. This was a devout person by all accounts. Was regular churchgoer. Was not the
Yep.
kind of person who would immediately look at and say, this is a potential killer. In fact, you would think the opposite. His background in engineering and science would make him very, very careful, one would think, in terms of what plan he was putting in place. And so you have to sort of accept, this is not your typical profile of a killer.
And not only that, but Trump called him anti-Christian, but in fact, if you read that email file, what comes across to me at least is that he thinks this is almost his Christian duty because the administration is so unchristian in its treatment of immigrants, in its treatment of minorities. And so he even quotes in there, turn the other cheek, but at some point, a good Christian has to fight for what is right.
Absolutely. And I think he means good Christian is anyone who supports him. I think that's his definition, at least the president, of
Oh,
what he
yeah,
thinks of
yeah.
Christianity. We should point out that right now in DC, the Epstein saga is struggling for attention. Epstein survivors are gathering with the representative from Virginia, not from Virginia, sorry, Ro Khanna. I'm not sure where he's from. And then we also have the King Charles III, in town to meet the president. It's a very big event, of course. We haven't had a king show up in here for a long time, if ever. So Donald Trump will host him at a state banquet tonight, and yet the Epstein saga looms large over the events today because, of course, the king's brother was involved in the Epstein saga. He was the person named as one of the people who raped Virginia Giuffre.
And his title, he was stripped of his title in the UK for that.
Yeah. So it's a question that absolutely looms large over the state visit. And yet the king refuses to meet with survivors. The president refuses to meet with the survivors. They're having a separate meeting today. And you can't really look at that in isolation. You have to look at, as the president does, he looks at all of this in terms of attention and media attention and bandwidth. And so he knew this event was coming. He knew the king would be in town. And from a political opportunity perspective or media narrative management perspective, he would have been quite keen on stifling any Epstein questions and any Epstein coverage this week. So the timing of the events on Saturday night, preceding the king's visit, that's a perfect opportunity in terms of the media narrative.
Except, and this is one of the things that I wanted to mention, so I'm glad that you gave me this in. If this was staged, and if it was staged in an effort to distract from Epstein stuff, it failed miserably because right in the email, Alan says, pedophile, rapist. He alludes directly to Trump's involvement in the Epstein stuff. So it failed.
It failed, or did it fail? I don't know what happened there. Sometimes my camera resets itself. Come back. It failed, but it also succeeded in some ways because he gets to be the victim for a minute here. The president gets to say to everybody, I am the victim of the Epstein things. I'm not a pedophile. He said that without any follow-up questions, really, from Norah O'Donnell on 60 Minutes on Sunday. He's able to, claim unity after the assassination attempt, or the so-called assassination attempt. And he's able to say, I've been the one who's victimized by these horrible Democrats. And then, his spokesperson, Levitt, goes out the next day with a list of, 8 Democrats that she says are basically responsible for this assassination attempt. I think she used I can't remember the term, but we'll find it in just a second. Talks about being in sync with the manifesto. That rollout for me, where you've got an event that immediately is followed by a call for a ballroom and not a call for an investigation into what happened on Saturday night. That's part one. Part two is he shows up on 60 Minutes blaming everybody else, the conspiracy theorists and everybody else, for accusing him of being a pedophile. And then the next day comes the hit list of the people they're going after, which happen to all be Democrats and political opponents. That to me is just a classic, this is what you would do if you were trying to create an event that would change the narrative. Those three things would happen in sequence day after day after day.
Yep. So they either aligned just so perfectly for him or they were staged. But either way, the fact is, for example, the White House Correspondents' Dinner is never held at the White House. So, so the ballroom thing is a complete red herring. Of course, they want to make hay with it while the sun is shining there, but it's not based in fact.
No, and it's a different event. I mean, the security lapse in the Hilton, the difficult part of the Hilton is that it's a hotel and people can check in. Like the shooter, he was able to check in, case the place. It's open to the public. Everybody can walk into that hotel. It's not, as you point out, a White House run event. It's owned by the Correspondents Association.
Exactly.
So it's their event. They decide who they invite. It's not always the president, although often is. It's a very crowded event. The security is very difficult in that venue. And of course it would be safer if it was in the ballroom at the White House, but the White House is not a hotel, and so the comparison just doesn't make any sense. Although I'm sure in his mind it does. Of course, today there's a bill, by the way. Did you see this? That Senator Graham is putting in a bill saying the taxpayers should now fund this, the ballroom and the bunker, based on the events on Saturday night.
I'm sure. I'm
as a-
sure
as a
he
pivot.
thought that up all himself too. I'm
Yeah.
sure no one from the White House, put that in his ear. I mean, in a way, that's a great thing for that bill to come up because the entire lawsuit is their theory, their defense in the lawsuit for the ballroom is predicated on, in part, that that it's going to all be covered by private funds. So this will throw a wrench in the works that will just further tank that lawsuit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a very good point you're making. The other things that have come up before we get into the affidavit on Saturday night that people keep pointing to, one of them is Carolyn Levitt's, and someone just mentioned it in the chat here, comments before the event. So hours before, that she's having a typical sort of media opportunity and the lineup going into the Hilton Ballroom, and she describes the event as is going to have shots being fired, which is such a. Let's just listen to it because I have it on tape, and then I'd love to get your comments. And then there's another, and I understand that. Let's see what you have to say. Let's go try.
It'll be entertaining. There will be some shots fired tonight.
I was sitting next to Carol.
So what do you think about that part? And then we'll get into the other part.
I just think it was unfortunate. I mean, this was a roast type event, and that's something people say is, take your best shot at roasting me. I think there's no love lost between me and Ms. Levitt, but even she would not be so blindingly stupid as to telegraph that there was a setup.
Yeah. I mean, that would be ridiculous, of course, for her. I agree with you. I think it sounds, it's an unusual choice of words. I wouldn't use the words shots will be fired if I was going to be saying there'll be fireworks or there'll be, other things. I wouldn't say shots would be fired, but that's her choice of words. What happens right afterwards is that her husband is seated next to a Fox News reporter who then goes on Fox News and gives a partial report because her phone gets cut off about what happened next.
The press secretary's husband, he was one of our guests. He was seated right next to me, and right as the dinner was starting, the national anthem happened, and then he kind of leaned over and said, I watched you on TV, you did a great job. You need to be very safe. And he was just very serious when he said that to me. And he kind of looked around the room and he said, there are some.
And then it cuts out. This is Carolyn Levitt's husband. So that begins to.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that colors things a little bit. It's different. We don't know what he said. It is interesting the feed cut off at that point. Why did this, she says the cell phone just cut out, but why? And why didn't she reconnect? And why have we still not heard what Carolyn Levitt's husband said? So, certainly if she knew, he would have maybe known. I mean, that's the connection there, if she knew. But we're not saying that she did. We don't have any evidence of that.
And it could be something as simple as he noticed that the security was really lax.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, to have the President of the United States go to what is essentially, even though it's a private by invitation event, it's still essentially a public event at a hotel where it was impossible to really, cover all of the different points of entry. You know, it 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 didn't take much of a stretch of an imagination to imagine that something might happen.
Now, there has been another assassination attempt there. We know that Reagan was assassinated outside that hotel. And since then, they've created a very secure environment for any presidential visits. There's actually its own entrance now. The president can drive in, park his car in the garage, or his drivers can park the car in the garage, and then he can go up in the secure entrance, and he has his own entrance into the ballroom, which happens
Right.
directly into the ballroom. Now, that is not the same entrance that Cole Allen stormed on Saturday night.
It was like 2 floors up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been there. It's really you walk into the Concourse Level, and there's a pretty big. I have a Google image of what it looks like, although it's hard to really tell from this image what it's like. But you walk in on the main level, and it's teeming with people on that night. This is the hottest ticket in DC. Every year, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Even though it's Donald Trump, people don't like him, but nevertheless, people come to this event. It's just considered a very, very high-profile, big merger of entertainment, politics, and a whole bunch of other things. So people really like it. And here's the image that I asked Google to come up with this. It's hard to tell, but this is all underground. So there's the big ballroom is there, and it looks like a bit of an arena, all underground. And there's lots of tables in the middle. Each table is owned by a media group. Most of the tables are bought by a media group or an outlet of some sort. So you might have one table that has NBC executives and NBC guest stars there. And each table is also encouraged to invite one political figure to their table. So someone might invite the speaker, another person might invite, anybody else, a cabinet secretary. And then there's film stars that also show up sometimes. And the trick of the night is when you're sitting at one of those tables, is if anyone at your table says, I want to meet that person over there, you have to go and introduce them, even though if you don't know them. So it's a real networking opportunity for everybody. When I was there, Tom Cruise was sitting their table across the way from me, and my guest at my table, who was the cabinet secretary's wife, was sitting next to me, and she said, can you introduce me to Tom Cruise? And I was like, well, I have no idea if I can, but I'm about to try. So, I walked over to Tom Cruise, said, hey, nice to meet you, Tom. This is who I am, and this is, the cabinet secretary's wife, and she'd like to say hello. He was perfectly charming, lovely, and that's how everyone connects with each other. It's a really good event from that perspective. It humanizes everybody. It gets everyone comfortable with each other. There's news reporting that goes on, but mostly it's a very, very good networking opportunity. So that happens in this big ballroom downstairs. Now, to gain access to that, you have to go down a set of escalators, which is hard to really. There's this. It doesn't look very good in this image, but you walk in on the concourse level, and you have to go downstairs through these escalators. It's very jammed at that point. There's just too many people there. So you can imagine thousands of people trying to get into this tiny ballroom through one set of escalators. There's a crunch there. It's very crowded. It's not easy to get in. Finally, you get in. It's a bit of a mess on the way in, but it's worth it. The night is fun. Now, he knew this. There's no way that Cole Allen didn't know it was going to be very difficult to get to their ballroom. It was just. There's no ways you would study that layout for 2 or 3 days. You wouldn't realize there's not a chance I'm going down the set of escalators with 1,000 people trying to get through to find somebody to shoot. It just seems kind of unlikely.
I still want to know why Trump decided to go.
Mhm.
I haven't heard anything that came from an original source that said, "Hey, this is why." He hates the press.
Mhm.
What possible reason, what went through his head to say, "I think I'll go to sit with 1,000 people where a large portion of them are evil and hate me and lie, and where I will be exposed." Uh,
I agree with
what
you.
was
That's
the
a very good
reason?
question. Because it's almost like if, and I'm saying this is a big if you're staging an event that could put all those people in harm's way, if you're really sort of maniacal and darkly intentioned, that might be something you would want to do. You might want to put everyone in harm's way or to scare everybody or, these are his enemies mostly. And some of them, he's senior cabinet members and his direct deputies. It's interesting that he would put them in harm's way as well if this was a stage event. But we're just not saying that it was. I'm just saying, it is a good question. Why show up? He's not someone who takes criticism easily. He's funny, but not in the funny way that we would expect. He's not self-deprecating. It's more like he's an attack dog, which we all find kind of amusing. But that
Well,
doesn't make him a perfect guest for this event.
the people in the live chat are saying that he was going because he was going to attack the press because he would have a podium from which to attack, and that may well be it.
Yeah, it could well be it. So let's take a look at the affidavit itself.
Okay, so can I just explain?
Yeah, of course.
For people. So basically, the process is that, someone has to go and, in order to get an arrest warrant or to level a case against someone, you have to have corroborating evidence, and that is often in the form of an affidavit that's attached to, as it is here, to the complaint. And so this affidavit is the thing that is supporting the arrest warrant.
Right. So there's another page that comes before it, and it's a criminal complaint that says, I so and so complainants in this case state the following is true, and then it lists the offense descriptions and the code sections. The first one is attempt to assassinate the president of the United States. Is that something that would be a high level of require a high level of proof? One would think, right?
Well, I got to tell you, I actually wrote, I think you read on my Substack, that I believe that a good defense lawyer would be able to get him out from that particular charge, which, yes, is the most serious of the charges. I think I have had one person who also has done defense lawyering that disagrees with me. But I think there's a pretty good chance if he has really good representation that representation, that attorney would be able to argue that there actually was no evidence of intent because they are relying on, there's two things they're relying on. They're relying on that email and they're relying on the facts of what actually happened. And the email never even mentions Trump. The only way that they get to say his email evidences intent is to say that Trump is the pedophile rapist to whom he was referring.
Which they can't do, obviously, because they can't do
Well,
that.
they can say that the perception is that, and so it's by inference. But anyway,
But that's interesting what you're saying. What you're saying is that it's a very loose charge that they don't necessarily have the evidence to prove that, from what we can tell.
right.
The other ones, transportation of a firearm and ammunition in interstate commerce with intent to commit a felony. Now, these were his weapons. The intent to commit a felony is serious, but these were his weapons. I mean, yes, he didn't maybe declare it to Amtrak. Is that really a serious crime per se?
Well, if his intent, if they can prove that he was doing it specifically with the intent to commit this crime, then yes, that really is a thing. But it is a much less serious one than attempting to assassinate the president. So
Yeah.
the thing that
then-
I believe is
yeah.
I believe that the outcome of this will be that he will be found guilty of the two lesser charges, but perhaps not of the really serious one.
The third one, which is 18 U.S.C. 924C1A3, I don't even know what those mean, but you'll tell us. It says discharge a firearm during a crime of violence. That's in dispute a little bit because
It is, yes.
we don't know that he fired his gun.
I think we know that he fired the shotgun because I believe credible accounts are that a shell casing was found. What we don't know is, we know a Secret Service agent was hit,
Mhm.
but there are conflicting reports as to whether he was hit by Cole Allen's gun or friendly fire. And the email bends over backwards to say that no law enforcement are his targets, which actually brings me to one of my theories about that, but we can get into that later.
Okay. I like the tease. I'll stay with the tease. Everyone needs to hang around because Ann
Well-
Mitchell has a theory that she's going to reveal to us in just a
I
bit.
I just don't want to detract from our going through the affidavit.
No, I get that. I'm just playing TV boy.
I know.
Sorry, one second. Sorry about that. So let's go through this. This is produced by a FBI person, or who would have written this? Do you know?
This is-
Do you know?
Yeah. So this is an affidavit of, in other words, a sworn statement by a law enforcement person who is with the FBI. In the affidavit, it just says law enforcement, but if you go all the way down to the signature block, you will see that he says Special Agent FBI.
Okay. And they're describing the violations here, which we just discussed. And then they go on to reveal the information. So I'm just going to get beyond. Is there anything on this page that we need to share, or have we sort of covered it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm actually curious if I can just ask the people out there the people who have received this document either through me or Zev, are you guys reading along with us and following along? Because that would be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, please do. Actually, it's going to be very, very helpful. And I'm learning a lot as I always do in reading these case filings. But your knowledge is so invaluable here, Anne. So I'm so glad
thank
you're here
Thank
to
you.
share this because we're learning from one of the best here. And so let's go to page 2 then. And you can walk us through this I can certainly navigate if you want or read things, but is there anything that you want to say about this page, this probable cause section?
All right, let me get,
I can read it while we start doing it. So,
I got it here.
Okay.
But go ahead. Yeah, read it. Sure.
So on April 25th, 2026, the White House Correspondents Association dinner was held at the Washington Hilton Hotel located at this address. Multiple high-ranking U.S. government officials attended and were featured at the dinner, including President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the Vice President of the United States, and multiple cabinet secretaries. Next point. More than 7 weeks earlier, on March 2nd, 2026, President Trump publicly announced that he would attend the dinner, posting it on Truth Social. The White House Correspondents Association has asked me very nicely to be the honoree at this year's dinner, a long and storied tradition since it began in 1924 under then President Calvin Coolidge. President Trump added that it would be his honor to accept the invitation. The March 2nd, 2026 post was publicized by various media outlets. Then it starts breaking down Cole Allen's movement. So on about April the 6th, 2026, Allen made a hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton Hotel for 3 nights, from April the 24th to April the 26th, 2026. This is about 5 weeks after the president made his announcement. That's my additional note there. On or about April 21, 2026, Allen traveled by train from his home near Los Angeles, California to Chicago, Illinois. Allen arrived in Chicago on or about April 23rd, 2026. The same day, Allen boarded a train in Chicago, Illinois, which arrived in Washington, D.C. on April 24th, 2026 at approximately 1 p.m. And then it says a few hours later, Allen checked into the specific hotel room at the Washington Hilton Hotel located at this address. And then Allen remained there overnight.
So I want to point something out that nobody else is, and probably because it's relatively minor, but it's still a thing. The narrative whereby he goes from Los Angeles to Chicago and then boards another train from Chicago to DC, makes it sound even more premeditated, like, yeah, he took two different trips. But in reality, as anyone who has ever ridden Amtrak coast to coast knows, you have to switch trains in Chicago. It's
Mhm.
part of the trip. I've done that trip at least a half a dozen times. And it's kind of like saying a person who books a trip from California to Paris. It's kind of like describing, you know, they got off in New York and then they took another plane to Paris. It makes it sound more intentional somehow. And things like that are very important when you're talking about a criminal trial.
Mhm. People are asking me to zoom in on the page here, and I can't in this current setup, so I apologize. Um, I wonder if there's another way to show this in a bigger screen. It
See,
might be
this
more.
is, guys, I happen to know that Zev sent out this document to his subscribers. This is why you need to subscribe to him.
Yes, exactly. And you did too. So everyone
I
needs to
did too.
subscribe to Anne too. Does this help? I hope this helps a little bit. It looks a little larger to me, but maybe it isn't really. There's one other option here. That doesn't work. This one here, no, that one doesn't work. That doesn't work because where's Anne? And this one is my final best bet. I don't know which, any of those look bigger? They don't really, do they?
A little
Maybe
bit.
something a little bit bigger. Okay. Let's
Oh,
stick with,
they're saying they can zoom. So yeah,
okay.
looks good.
Okay. So this is interesting to me what you were saying, because you're talking basically about the framing of his intention here. It does
Right.
seem premeditated when he is doing this 7 weeks before the event. Sorry, 5 weeks before the event that he's booking his hotel room. I mean,
Yeah.
7 weeks before the event, 5 weeks after the announcement, that he's thought about this. I mean, this doesn't seem like something he's doing haphazardly. It's not a, how am I going to do this right now? Maybe get on a train and go. He's thought about this.
I think, I could certainly make the argument based on the facts as we know them right now that he thought about it, but he wasn't firmly planning to do it. Almost like, oh, I'm going to bring my guns along. I might decide to, maybe I won't. I mean, he just, even again, that email, it is not the ravings of a radicalized killer.
Mhm.
He's like the most reluctant assassin ever.
He really is. And that's one of the things that is nagging at me, is this guy does not look like he actually wants to do this. He doesn't feel like he wants to go through with it. He doesn't want to kill anyone. He's so worried about the collateral damage. We'll see this all later on, that it just doesn't make sense to me that this is, someone who's, determined to kill the president of the United States. There's just that element of it is missing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really important for people to understand that an affidavit like this, is intended to paint the action and the suspect in the most damning light. I mean, that's their job. If they didn't do that, then they would actually be doing a poor job of being an FBI agent swearing out an affidavit. I also want to mention that unless it's changed radically in the last few years, because people are asking, there is no, you don't have to go through anything like TSA when you go on a train on Amtrak. I have not done this, but I easily could have taken a whole armament on Amtrak on those half dozen times I went on the train, and nobody would know better, different.
That's interesting. So there's no metal detectors when you board a train?
Not when I was doing it. Again, it may have changed recently. I haven't done it in several years, but at least when I was traveling, no, there was not. Now I'm guessing after this, maybe there will be.
It's interesting. In Canada, there is at the Canadian Via Rail, there is a metal detector. So it's interesting that Amtrak does not do the same thing on people are boarding a train. It seems kind of obvious they would, but
yeah,
maybe they don't. So now they get into the dinner was scheduled to broadcast on national TV at 8 p.m. on the evening of April 25th. I need to change pages here, don't I?
Wait, can I just,
yeah.
while you're changing pages, there is someone on YouTube talking about the quote element that he had two guns and knives. And I just love it when non-lawyers try to sound like lawyers, the element.
Yeah.
Here in the United States, we have the Second Amendment. The fact of you working or of you carrying, not even open carrying, but of taking your guns from point A to point B is not in and of itself anything.
Yeah. They're just, you're allowed to have, it's his guns. He's allowed to carry them, right? So the dinner scheduled to begin at 8 p.m., says this affidavit. At approximately 8:40, Allen approaches a security checkpoint on the terrace level of the hotel, leading to the location of the dinner. So this is upstairs, and I don't think it's clear from this. Oh, sorry, my phone just went off. That shouldn't be happening. This is happening upstairs, and he's going to go downstairs from where he is right there to get into access to the hotel. It's quite far away, in other words, is what I'm saying. So the dinner, it says here that Allen approached the security checkpoint on the terrace level of the hotel, leading to the location of the dinner. Allen approached and ran through a magnetometer holding a long gun. As he did so, the U.S. service personnel assigned to the checkpoint heard a loud gunshot. U.S. Secret Service Officer VG was shot once in the chest. Officer VG was wearing a ballistic vest at the time. And this is what we see in this surveillance video. So just to back it up, what they're saying here is...
It looked like he checked it twice.
Lieutenant Hudson, you monitoring this there?
Here it comes up. Shall I post it as soon as he passes?
So we don't see the officer going down, do we? On that? Do we see it? Did you see it? I didn't see the officer actually going down. So I can't tell. You can watch it again, but I don't know where that guy is. You know, if he's getting shot by...
It looked like he checked it twice.
I have a question.
Here it comes up.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, wait. Okay. So I have a question.
I'm just trying to see if it is there. I don't see it.
So the shots were fired one floor up, two floors up?
Yeah.
How many floors? How many
One
floors
floor up. At least one. Maybe it's two, but I think it's one.
So how is it even possible that they heard that in the ballroom and it resonated as being shots being fired?
Well, there's an escalator that leads you towards the ballroom, or, bank of escalators. So there's an open air space there that allows that to travel. But what I was trying to say earlier is that's a very congested spot. That is not, 50 feet away from the president when there's 1,000 people in the way is not as close as 50 feet to the president when you can see him directly in your line of sight. I mean, that's just a very different. There's no way he could have shot the president from where he was. No way. He would not have even.
And there's right.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying. He was not trying to shoot the president at that moment.
Yeah. But then what was he trying to do? Which is, it speaks to the rest of this is, why go through this whole thing? He's staying at the hotel for 3 days. Let's keep reading and then we'll go back to it. Where are we? So Officer VG drew his service weapon and fired multiple times at Allen, who fell to the ground and suffered minor injuries, but was not shot. Allen was subsequently arrested. For some reason, he just falls. It's over. He's done. That's his end of his mission. He's basically stormed the magnetometers. No shots fired at him hit him, which is kind of remarkable at that range. When you think there's all these people there drawing their weapons, nothing actually shoots him. Nobody actually gets him. At the time of his arrest, Allen was in possession of a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun and a Rock Island Army 1911.38 caliber pistol on his person. As part of the investigation, law enforcement reviewed records of firearm transactions. These were his guns, yada, yada. I'm just going to try to go quickly here because it's going to run out of time. And then in the next page, it talks about being advised of his Miranda rights. And shortly before 8:40 p.m. on Friday, Allen sent an email to members of his family and former employer explaining the actions he was about to take. The email, a copy of which law enforcement has obtained from a recipient, stated, "I wish I could have said anything earlier, but doing so would have made none of this possible. My sincerest apologies for all the trouble I've caused. Scheduled send, Cole. Based on my training and experience with electronics accounts, I believe that under these circumstances, the phrase scheduled send means that before attempting to breach the security perimeter at approximately 8:40 p.m. on April 25th, 2026, Alan used the settings of his email account to schedule the email to automatically send a predetermined time with additional actions from him. This is what's been called the manifesto. It's not a manifesto. Yeah, it's not. It just isn't. So talk to us a little bit about this, the premeditation of this. He's sending this thing, and then he says, "I wish I could have said. Wish I had said anything earlier." And then he says, "But doing so would have made none of this possible." Why?
Well, because someone would have tipped off law enforcement, right?
But not necessarily. If you confided in someone you loved or trusted and said, "Hey, this is something I'm going to do, I'm thinking about doing," there isn't necessarily a tip-off, but he's making it sound to me like, had he told anybody, this would not have been possible, whatever this is. And that to me it's a strange way of phrasing it, because he could have said, as I told you, I'm very opposed to the president. I'm taking that action I spoke about. There's all sorts of things he could have said.
Right. It's all so wishy-washy. I have seen flying by in skimming news accounts that that his brother possibly contacted them, like law enforcement, before this happened, which would have meant before the email. But I have not been able to find that anywhere. So if anyone out there has seen that, let us know. But if that is the case, or even if it's not, and this goes to one of my two theories that I have about all of this, it's possible that if the Secret Service was tipped off to this, then that would play into the false flag narrative, because instead of nabbing him, they allowed it to unfold. Now, I am not saying that I believe that's what happened. I'm saying that's the one thing that knits the two sort of non-aligning things together.
I agree with you.
But again, I'm not saying that I think that's what happened.
No, I don't. We don't think we have proof of that. But there is a sense you get out of all of this where you're just like, this guy says an intentional person, and then he uses the line, which we'll see in the next page here, which is the actual email, or they're calling manifesto, but it isn't a manifesto. Let me pull it back up here, where here it is. Is this it, or is it the page before this? That's the bottom of this page. But he talks about this prankster. Maybe they're trying to prank me. And I'll read the whole thing, but just in here, he talks about they trying to prank me. Who is they in this setting? Who would be trying to prank him? And this might be the next page when we get to that pranking section. But I'm going to read this quickly, but we are running out of time, so I'll just do a good quick speed read so everyone's up to speed. Hey, hello everybody. So I may have given a lot of people a surprise today. Let me start off by apologizing to everyone whose trust I abused. I apologize to my parents for saying I had an interview without specifying it was for Most Wanted. I apologize to my colleagues and students for saying I had a personal emergency. By the time anyone reads this, I probably most certainly do need to go to the ER, but can hardly call that not a self-inflicted status. I apologize to all the people I traveled next to, all the workers who handled my luggage, and all the other non-targeted people at the hotel who I put in danger simply by being near. I apologize to everyone who was abused and or murdered before this, to all those who suffered before I was able to attempt this, to all who may still suffer after, regardless of my success or failure. I don't expect forgiveness, but if I could have seen any other way to get this close, I would have taken it. Again, my sincere apologies. And then he goes on to, I do not know why I did this, any of this, or why I did any of this. I'm a citizen of the United States of America. What my representatives do reflects on me, and I'm no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. Sorry.
Isn't it funny that we all know who he's talking about without him naming him?
Yeah.
I mean, funny in a bad way.
No, but it is absolutely true that we all think that of the president of the United States because there's vast amounts of evidence alleging that he is, in fact, these things. And then he says, well, to be completely honest, I was no longer willing to a long time ago, but this is the first real opportunity I've had to do something about it. While I'm discussing this, I'll also go over my expected rules of engagement, probably a terrible format, but I'm not in military, so too bad. Administration officials, not including Mr. Patel, which is really interesting.
Okay. Can we stop there?
Yeah.
Because that's my other theory.
Mhm.
If you look at this entire statement, he is very careful to exclude law enforcement. He obviously thinks law enforcement is, to be respected. It's a respectful job, right? Kash Patel is basically law enforcement.
Mhm.
He's not the other types of cabinet or administration officials. So my theory as to why he exempted Patel is because he views Patel as law enforcement.
And why
Okay,
would
keep
he
going.
want to exempt law enforcement?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I can guess that it's because, if you read the rest of the statement,
Mm.
he exempts all law enforcement, and I think I think he gives a reason in there.
Okay. Yeah, let's read it. So, so administration officials, not including Mr. Patel, they are targets prioritized from highest ranking to lowest, meaning the president, you would think. Secret Service, they are targets only if necessary and to be incapacitated non-lethally if possible.
Okay.
AKA, I hope they're wearing body armor because center mass with shotgun messes up people who aren't.
Again, the most reluctant assassin ever.
Really, I mean, truly, this bizarre, so concerned about collateral damage, so concerned about anyone being hurt. Hotel security, not targets if at all possible, aka unless they shoot at me. Capitol Police, same as hotel security. National Guard, same as hotel security. Hotel employees, not targets at all. Guests, not targets at all. In order to minimize casualties, I'll also be using buckshot rather than slugs. There's less penetration through walls. This man does not want to kill people. He does not interested in killing people. So this is the thing that sticks in my mind. You've got a guy here who is smart, who's an engineer, whose job was previously employed by a drone company. He's a video game designer. He understands stakes and preparedness and all these things that you would need to do if you're an engineer. He worked for NASA on the risk evaluations of NASA. This is not a guy who would make a stupid decision to run a magnetometer. He would make the only decision to run a magnetometer if he thought it was the only decision he could make, which he's reluctant to kill people. So he's storming the least likely place to get through there. He was in a hotel room. He registered there for 3 days, casing the joint. There are 4 other entrances to this ballroom, which did not have magnetometers. They could why did he make the decision to go to the least likely place?
I really think that this was more performative, a political statement, than a sincere effort to kill anybody.
Mhm.
I think this is a guy who was at his wit's end because he saw what was happening, how ICE was treating people. He saw how minorities were being marginalized. I think it may be important that he is himself a person of color. Um, I think that he got to a point where he was just saying, I can't take this anymore. I have to do something. But he really didn't have the temperament or the appetite to actually kill someone. I just think that this was his way of saying some of us are at our wits' end and are so close to bursting that look at this, I could have killed someone. And maybe he would have gone through with it if he had reached the point where he could have had that access. But I mean, didn't he also just immediately fold?
He just fell to the ground. He didn't want. He
Yeah,
wasn't shot. He fell to the ground and
yeah.
stopped.
This is not a killer.
This
This
is
is a
not someone
person.
who was determined to kill. And certainly, look, the thing is, most times you want to assassinate a leader, you get a line of sight. Most people choose a high above line of sight so they can really see their target. We've seen it in many places. If you were going to do that, you would have been inside the ballroom, high up. There's lots of places there, trust me, where you could be high up and get line of sight with the president. And there are many ways to have gained access to that place, especially because we now have Aaron Parnas reporting that someone at the hotel told him that the key cards were not active, were not working. The key card access was not working on the night of the shooting. In other words, anyone, I don't know if that's not confirmed by more than one, but one person told Aaron this, and he's reporting it, that anyone staying at the hotel could have gone to any floor on that night.
Is that actually what did the person say the key card access wasn't working and that it was wide open, or did they just say the access wasn't working? Because to me, that suggests it means nobody can go anywhere. Their cards don't work.
No, you could go in any floor was the thing. And then other people said, these reporters on the scene said that they felt like the entire venue was wide open. That's not, the reporters don't say that if they feel like there's a secure environment. They're saying it was wide open.
Well, and this is the reason that, again, this is not what I believe, but the one way to make it all line up is that they knew he was there. They knew what he was going to do, and they were going to make it really easy for him to get to a certain point so they could have this event happen.
Yeah, it's almost like they wanted a much worse event, knowing his capabilities. Maybe they were thinking, they wanted maybe something to happen that was more serious.
Maybe.
Because I'm just thinking that your theory. It's not saying it's what I believe, but I just think that there's something in here where you're like, why would you leave all the elevators exposed like that? Why? And why would you bring a guy, if you're bringing a guy, who has the capabilities to strategize an effective way of committing an assassination, and bring him into that environment where it was so wide open? To me, that's, that it's very frightening to think of that concept. It's very, but this is what false flags. I'm not saying this is a false flag. I'm saying this is the way false flags happen. The idea behind a false flag, if you were fighting a war with somebody, you were using, it comes from a naval conflict, where the other, you cloak yourself as your enemy using their flag. That's a false flag. And then you commit an act that makes it look like your enemy has done something, even though you've done it. That's the idea behind a false flag. And this scenario, whether he just makes it feel like he's been set up to do something that looks like it's a Democrat, or it looks like it's the opposition doing it, but it's actually them cloaked. That person is cloaked as a Democrat, isn't actually acting as a Democrat. That you said to me something last night when we were chatting. He would have to have been in on it, and then I was thinking, well, he doesn't necessarily have to be in on it unless, because the situation could have just been made possible for him.
Well,
to
and
do
that's
something.
right. And that's where I say that if they had been tipped off that he was coming to do this, and then they allowed it to happen, because I do want to address, there are a lot of conspiracy theories flying around, and some of them have to do with maybe it was a complete setup and he was in on it. And here's the thing about that. If that were the case, there would have to be some way that they would be sure he wouldn't fold and talk, because let me tell you that prison is not fun. And he, once you got him on the stand, if you did, or got statements from him, once he was in the reality of being in prison, he would pretty quickly fold and say, hey, actually, they paid me to do this. So I think that's really unlikely, because anyone who would pay someone to do that would have to be pretty dumb to not realize that the person might fold and talk.
And likely they would kill the suspect. I mean, they would just match it cleaner to kill them. Well, they're not always would they do it, but your point is very, very important. This is not necessarily, but if they knew that this guy was intending to do it, if they were tipped off by somebody, if there was a awareness, and they would just say, well, we're just going to let him. We're going to leave the doors open.
Right.
And it also explains the president's very strange reaction, because the president sits
non-reaction.
For 8 seconds after Vance is taken off the stage. I'll play you that as we leave here. But this is unusual to me, that Vance is rushed off like he really, really is in an emergency. Security service detail takes it very seriously. Trump waves them off. He tells Norton O'Donnell the next day, he told them to wait a minute. And watch this reaction here. It's just very telling. van's being pulled off. There is Donald Trump's Secret Service detail around him, still there. They grab him then, and then he trips. It, by the way, takes 8 seconds, about the time Vance is pulled off and the president. He heard the gunfire, and then he tells, he tells security service, no, I'm just going to sit here for another few seconds to see what happens. Why does he need to see what happens? What is that? What is he looking for?
So one of my followers said that he or she thought that Trump is actually quite deaf and is too proud to wear hearing aids, and so that maybe he didn't even hear the shots. I don't know.
He did. You said, yeah, but
well, yeah.
And his wife told him. The first lady said that sounds like a very serious sound.
Right, but I also think he has the hubris and, let's face it, the narcissism to genuinely believe he's untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
I think he thinks he has some sort of special protective cone around him and that he walks, among the mere mortals, but he's untouchable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's true. He does think that. He thinks he's sort of God's representative. Or, just to play devil's advocate here, if he knew that the doors had been left wide open, maybe he wanted to see what was going to happen next. Or maybe he wanted to see what the reaction of his cabinet secretaries were going to do. Whatever it was, it's not normal for people who face that kind of threat. I mean, if you're just a politician with gunfire at your event, you would run like crazy. You're going to get out of there like crazy.
I mean, what will be interesting is, the security failures were legion. And what will be interesting will be to see what that fallout is, because you may remember that other presidents, when there have been these security lapses, heads rolled.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He doesn't want an investigation into the security either, which is just strange. His solution is, let me build my ballroom, and I don't want an investigation into the security. Well, that makes no sense. And we're out of time. I've got another show in coming up in 1 hour and a bit, and I've got to prepare for it. But I wanted to is there anything else in this affidavit that you want me to zero in on while we still have a few minutes here?
No, actually, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is I want to make sure that another legal action related to Epstein doesn't get lost. So for people who don't know, the amazing Katie Fang filed a lawsuit against the administration for their failure to comply with the Epstein File Transparency Act. And it is a beautiful lawsuit. And so I just wanted to bring that to people's
I saw that
attention.
today, and I reached out to Cato, whom I don't know, and asked if she would come on the show, and I haven't heard back from her. But if you know her, maybe you can put in a good word for me. I'd love to talk to her about that. I think that there is that is remarkably good and prescient and important that she's doing it, because it just seems like the right thing to do at this time when no one is standing up for survivors. To have someone like Katie care about the survivors in this way is great.
Right. And, if anyone wants to see the lawsuit, it should be in your inbox if you follow me. And Zeb, of course, I can give you the lawsuit if you want to read it. I don't know Katie personally, but what I can say is that her lawsuit is predicated in part on the fact that they were so blindingly stupid to think that if they withheld documents, somehow those same documents wouldn't make it out anyway. And so once you have documents that you can prove they withheld, lawsuit time.
Yeah, and they did withhold some pretty damning documents, which do in fact show the president may be all the things he claims he's not, including saying he's not a pedophile. That is fantastic. And thank you, Anne. I love doing these with you. Your legal brain is so helpful, and your experience is so helpful. Everybody should subscribe to your Substack, because what you do is what nobody else does. You go to the source documents and you help people find those source documents. You explain the source documents, and for paid subscribers, they can actually access the source documents. Those are incredible. It's a lot of work. I know because I search for these things myself. But they're also it's also really important work that everyone gets to read the source stuff, because you just, when you go to the source, as we've done today, it's just much clearer.
That's
clearer.
right. And that's why I do it. So yeah, people who subscribe get the source documents right in their inbox along with my explanation. But also, if you are not subscribed to Zev, like, oh my gosh, you are really missing some amazing information. So do it. Just do it.
Thank you. That's very nice of you, Anne. And this story sort of captured my attention for the last few days, and I've sort of neglected some of the other news. But it's because whenever I get this gut sense about stories. It's like a newsy sense of stories. I've done it for so long that if something doesn't feel right, you have to, as a journalist, it's your job to go down these avenues and to really explore whether the facts line up with what you're being told. And in this case, the public narrative, the Trump narrative, doesn't make sense. The public narrative, which was that this was staged, but he's still the real thing. Oh, sorry, it wasn't staged, but it was an opportunist sort of political thing by the president based on a real event, also doesn't hold completely for me. So is there a third narrative that we're missing in all of that? And that's the one you're pointing to. And it's a question, we're not saying it is. Is there another framing that allows both a determined person who wants to make a statement for the reasons he wants to make a statement, and also it being a political opportunity moment, and that the two things can be seen in one whole as a false flag operation? And I think that's potentially what we're looking at here. That's my interpretation, not necessarily yours, but I like your theory as to how these two line up. It's complicated, I think. I don't think I made it any simpler by describing it that way. And terrific to see you. We'll do this again, I hope. And really, really great to have you on the show. And please subscribe, everybody, to Anne's great, it's called Notes from the Front, right?
Notes from the Front, but it's at Ann P. Mitchell, because when I started it, I didn't know that it was going to end up being, that would be the link. So
I had to change mine from Narrative because my narrative spelling is so weird. It's Narativ. No one could find it. Not that Zev Shalev is any easier to spell, but there you go. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll be back at 3:00 with Dean.
Bye, everyone.
And we'll do the 5-stack then. Hope you'll join us. Bye, and thanks to everybody.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Have a good day.